We are a people of stories. This is the message of this week's Torah portion, Ki Tavo. It describes the ritual of the first fruits. Moses is speaking to the Israelite people just before they enter the land of Israel. He tells them what to do when they get there. They'll possess the land. They'll settle in it. They'll plant their fields. They'll reap their harvest. And when they do, they're to take some of the first of each harvested crop and put it into a basket. They're to go to the priest in charge, and they're to leave the basket of first fruits with the priest as a gift to God. But before they depart, they have to say two things. One is an acknowledgement that this is the land that God gave them, and the other is a story. You shall recite as follows before the eternal your God. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, but there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Eternal, the God of our ancestors, and the Eternal heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. The Eternal freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portents, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, Eternal God, have given me. It's got a beginning, a middle, an end, and even a moral. Stories have a power to reach us that a more directed approach can never have. It's why Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who we heard earlier, tended to teach almost entirely in stories. It's why we celebrate Passover not just with prayers, but also with stories. In fact, the one I just told is the essence of the Haggadah. It's why the great book of Jewish law, the Talmud, is only partially a book of halakha, of rules. It is just as much a book of Agadah, of stories. Tomorrow night marks Slichot, the start of the few days leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We aren't having a service here because of what the school people would call a low attendance day. It's hard to compete with the Labor Day holiday. But even though we aren't gathering here tomorrow, we can mark that night on our own by starting to reflect on what we want to make of our own stories. We even tell a communal story of these holidays, that God looks at all of our individual stories and writes us in the book of life. As we think about what we want our own story to be, it can help to reflect on the stories that have shaped us. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. Think of a story that's moved you, perhaps one that's made a difference in your life. And if you feel comfortable doing so, in a little while I'm going to ask you to share that story. Keep it to about 2 minutes each. To give you some time, I'm going to share a story with you, one about getting ready for Rosh Hashanah. It's a traditional story, and it was first collected by scholars in Israel. It's called The Boy Who Blew the Shofar. Long ago, in the city of Kiev, there lived a young boy named Eliyahu. He was a fine student in the yeshiva, and he had great faith in God. One night, Eliyahu had a strange dream. In the dream, he was walking at night on the path that led to the synagogue, and when he arrived, he entered and found that it was empty. But he saw that a shofar and a large talit had been left on the bima where the rabbi led the prayers. Just then a man entered, and strange as it may seem, he was wearing a shroud, the garment worn by the dead. And stranger still, Eliyahu was not afraid. And as the man came closer to Eliyahu, the boy saw at once that he had a troubled appearance. The man said, I am one of 48 souls from the world of the dead who have been forced to wander between heaven and earth. Our souls have been trapped, unable to ascend since the time of our death at the hand of the Cossacks. The forces of evil have held us back, but we cannot bear waiting any longer to be set free. Please, Eliyahu, you must help us. But how can I help? The the boy said in the dream. You must take the talit and the shofar from the synagogue and go to the cemetery outside of town where we are gathered. And you must sound the shofar, but this must be done before the close of Rosh Hashanah. Then the gates of heaven will open and our wanderings will be ended. Eliyahu was even more shocked than before. But I'm only 12 years old. I don't even wear a talit, he answered, and I don't know how to blow the shofar. The man looked straight into the boy's eyes. Eliyahu, if the gates of heaven do not open for us before the close of Rosh Hashanah, we will have to wander for another year, he said. Only you can set us free. Then the shrouded man departed, just as the boy awoke. When he realized that he had been dreaming, Eliyahu sighed with relief. But all day long he was haunted by the man's words, only you can set us free. Now Eliyahu could not imagine stealing a shofar and talit from the synagogue, nor could he imagine blowing the shofar in a cemetery, for such a thing is never done. So even though the man's words came to him again and again, Eliyahu did not do as the man had asked, and so a whole day passed by. The next night Eliyahu dreamed again that he followed the path at night to the synagogue. This time there was a figure wrapped in a shawl standing and facing the ark. As he entered, the figure turned around, and Eliyahu saw that it was a woman. He could hardly believe his eyes. A woman standing at the holy ark, and a shrouded woman at that. Yet when this eerie figure approached him, the boy did not take fright, but instead felt sad for her, for he saw the look of suffering in her eyes. Then the woman spoke. Eliyahu, only 2 days remain before Rosh Hashanah. I am speaking for 48 souls whose fate is in your hand. You must take up the talit and the shofar and blow great blasts on it to open heaven's gates for us. Hurry to the cemetery, Eliyahu. Only you can set us free. Then the shrouded woman departed, and no sooner had she passed through the doorway than Eliyahu awoke. This time the boy was paralyzed with fear. I'm losing my mind. Who will forgive me for stealing from the synagogue, and who will believe my reason for doing so? With these thoughts tormenting him, another day passed, and Eliyahu did not do as the woman had asked. And yet he wanted to free those poor souls from their wandering. And the words of the woman returned to him again and again. Only you can set us free. Eliyahu was tired. He could not think clearly. But as it grew dark, he fell into a deep sleep. And he dreamed again that he entered the synagogue, and everywhere he looked he saw worshippers, men and women, all wearing shrouds, all chanting prayers. He recognized the shrouded man who had approached him in the first dream and the shrouded woman who had spoken to him in the second. He quickly counted and saw that there were 24 men on one side of the aisle and 24 women on the other, separated by the mechitza. What a strange congregation they were. Yet he did not feel terror at the sight of them, for he saw that they were all suffering. And then Eliyahu noticed that there was no one leading the congregation. He turned to the nearest man and said, "How is it that you are praying without a prayer leader?" "It is because we are waiting for him to put on the talit and take up the shofar," said the man. "And when do you expect him to come?" asked the boy. "He has already arrived," said the man. "Where is he?" the boy asked, for he was curious to know who the leader was. "Eliyahu, it is you we have been waiting for," said the man. Eliyahu looked around and saw that every eye in the congregation was fixed on him. Then the man said, "Only a short time remains. Hurry, Eliyahu. Only you can set us free." Just then, Eliyahu woke up. He was covered with a cold sweat. He leaped from his bed as if some great invisible force were pushing him and ran in the darkness to the synagogue. And when he reached it, he noticed that the door was open, and his heart almost stopped beating. He stepped inside and saw, to his great relief, that the synagogue was empty. His eyes were drawn to the talit and the shofar lying there, and he recognized the large talit as that of the rabbi himself. For a moment he stopped. Did he dare put on the rabbi's talit? Yet time was passing. Soon it would be too late. Quickly he picked up the talit and wrapped it around himself like a long robe. And strange to say, the moment the talit was on his shoulders, he felt greatly strengthened. Then he picked up the shofar and ran from the synagogue. In the short time, he reached the cemetery and entered the place where spirits and demons are said to roam. But now he gave no thought to fear of ghosts and demons. His only fear was that he would not be on time. Adonai in heaven, let me not be late, he said aloud. And as he stood amid those tombstones in the presence of all those departed souls, he had the same feeling that he had had in the dream, that all eyes were fixed on him. Then, hesitating no longer, Eliyahu lifted the shofar and blew on it. The first long unbroken note rang clearly through the night air. Then one after another, the broken notes came forth. Teruah shvarim, sounding like sobbing and wailing. And as he blew these notes, Eliyahu thought he heard sobbing and wailing all around him. He repeated the long, unbroken blast, the Tekiah Gedolah, and he held it for what seemed to be forever. And the instant he finished blowing it, the sound of rushing winds encircled him for several seconds as if they were hugging and embracing him, and he heard a distant creaking sound as if, somewhere far away, a great gate had opened. Then suddenly the winds grew calm, and for a few moments Eliyahu stood in the cemetery, wrapped in the large talit, holding the shofar in his hand. He felt a sense of calm and peace and stillness. But all at once he remembered that the men would be in the synagogue to pray, and he had to return the shofar in the prayer shawl. So in a panic he ran back as fast as his legs would carry him. When he arrived, Eliyahu saw that there was only one person there, only one man who was praying, and he was without a talit. The man turned around as Eliyahu entered, and the boy saw that he was none other than the rabbi himself. The boy was overcome with terror. Would the rabbi ever forgive him? But the rabbi smiled broadly as he approached the boy and put his arms around Eliyahu, who was still wearing his talit. And when the boy looked up in confusion, the rabbi said, "You were chosen, Eliyahu, because your faith is so strong, and because you opened the gates of heaven for them. Those souls have been freed from their wanderings, and at last have reached their final destination. They were right, you know, Eliyahu. Only you could have set them free."
Nobody's going to follow that. I said no one's going to follow that.
Anybody got one? Here. Good. Take that one. Come up and speak in the microphone so the video can hear you get. Oh boy.
Well, thank you all for letting me be here. So I'm going to tell you a story. And my name's Isaac. And before I tell you this story, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So, there's a man by the name of William James, Harvard professor, who's done a lot of writing with the study of knowledge called epistemology. And he wrote about a great many things. But one of the things that I remember him writing about when I was studying the study of knowledge is about words and about how people understand them. He wrote about a red ball. So if you can picture in your hand, picture a red ball. Now I say these words and there's a picture in my head, but I guarantee you that for each one of the people sitting here, when you hear a red ball, when you picture that in your head, it's going to be a different red ball than the one that is in my head. And it's a very important thought because a lot of Judaism is interpretation. And we are given these words and we have to figure out what the words mean and what we're going to do with them. And you have written law and you have oral law. And the oral law is the foundation of stories. And you know where I'm going with this. So one of my absolute favorite stories is As It's Written. It was written from people telling each other the stories, and eventually the stories got a little confused, so they wrote it down. And as the story goes, all of the souls of the people are underneath the Mount Sinai, and they're being given the law. And they pray, and they claim out, and they swear they want to hear the voice of God. And so what happens? Moses goes up and says, I want them to hear the voice of God. They're begging you. So the first law is recited. And in the voice of God, everybody's souls immediately leave their bodies. They are enraptured. And God says, well, we can't have everybody die. We need all the Jews back on earth. And he puts them all back in their bodies. And then the second law is recited. Same thing happens. Well, God, in the infinite wisdom and understanding and knowledge, and whoever really thinks about what it truly means to be all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, all possibilities of all times in every variation, is not only known but understood. Right? So, after that, what happens? Well, according to the story, God uses an angel, a messenger, and speaks the words. But this is the interesting part, and this is where I want to go to. Because through a divine miracle, the people heard, and it's written just like this, to the fullness of their understanding. And this is the important part, because we just talked about what does it mean. I can say words to each one of you, and each one of you thinks of a different thing. The fullness of your understanding is different. We talk about a divine being. We're human beings. We don't know what it truly means to be all of existence, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, what all is. People sitting in here, we can barely even count to 100. We don't even know what that means. You're going to tell me what thousands of years of existence are? And so these laws were given to the people, but they were given to them in the fullness of their understanding. And the way the story goes is that each one of those souls under this mountain, floating mountain, under them, each one heard and understood to the fullness of their understanding all of the laws. And if you believe the story, each one of our souls were there under this mountain at that time, understanding in the fullness of our understanding. And so what does that mean today? We have to sit there and we have to say, we have these laws, we have these words, but in the fullness of our understanding, my understanding will be different than yours. My understanding may or may not be more righteous than yours. But each of us have to act, and each of us have to understand in the fullness of our understanding. And that's my story. Anybody else?
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ellen. Hi. I'm sorry, I agree with Stacy here. I'm sorry. Where's the button for that? There we go. I'm sorry, it's just glaring. Anyway, hi. As a few of you know, a few weeks ago, Heidi and I led service, and the study the Devar Torah that I presented had to do with finding your spirituality. So one of my favorite stories we hear in many different forms over the years, but I have my form. A small child loves going to services with her Zadie, her grandfather. And they go to services, and she's seeing the rabbi saying all these wonderful words, and she hears the cantor singing all these wonderful songs. But yet she's this small child, and she doesn't know all these things. So week after week, she goes with her grandfather for Shabbat, and now it comes to the high holiday time. It is the most awesome, as in awe-inspiring and odd time of the year for us. And she comes into services with her grandfather, with her Zadie, and there's all these, and more people, and more people, and more people, and everybody is praying with the rabbi with these beautiful words, and with the cantor with these beautiful melodies. And she's still sitting there and says she doesn't know how to pray. She doesn't know all these things. So quietly, she's sitting beside her Zadie, and she starts singing a little tune to herself. Aleph, Bet, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Very quietly. And the service continues, and there are more beautiful words, and there are more beautiful melodies. And she's still sitting next to her Zadie and saying, I don't know how to pray their prayers. Aleph, Bet, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Just a little bit louder. And this goes on for a little bit more during the service until she's singing a little bit more and more loudly. Aleph, Bet, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. And the cantor looks down from the bima. He's up on this bima. She's up on this bima. And she hears this voice in the back of the congregation. She says, hold on a second, Rabbi, give me a second. And she goes down to the small child. And the small child is getting more and more afraid and hiding behind her Zadie because, oh my goodness, the cantor's coming down to talk to me. The cantor comes down and says, what were you singing? She says, well, I'm hearing all these wonderful words and I'm hearing all these wonderful melodies, but I don't know them. I don't know how to pray. So I knew these letters of the alphabet, so I started singing them, figuring, well, God knows what I mean. And the cantor looks at her and says, that is the best way to pray.
Any others? All right, then. May all your stories, as you approach these high holidays, be the ones that you want to tell God in the days to come. Our service continues on page 282 with Aleinu. Please rise.
Aleinu l'shabech l'adon hakol l'ateit gedula liotzer bereshit shelo asanu kigoye aratzon v'lo samanu k'mishpechot hadama shelo sam kelkenu kahen v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam V'anachnu horim u'mishtachavim u'modim Lifnei melech malchei amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu notei shamayim v'yotzer haaretz U'moshe nidaro b'shamayim nimal Ushinaruzo, Igove Miromi, U Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Efezulato, Kakatu Betorato, V'yadat Ahayam V'ashevota Elevavecha. Ki Adonai Hu Elohim B'shamayim Mimal V'yal haaretz V'itachad Einod.
On page 287, together, may we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding, love to each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace.
Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo Echad.
As most of you know, United States Senator John McCain finally succumbed to cancer this past week. I want to, as we go into Kaddish, I'd like to share these words from the final pages of his last book, The Restless Wave. He writes, "Before I leave, I'd like to see our politics begin to return to the purposes and practices that distinguish our history from the history of other nations. I would like to see us recover our sense that we are more alike than different. Then I would like to go back to our valley near Sedona and see the creek run after the rain and hear the cottonwoods whisper in the wind. I want to smell the rose-scented breeze and feel the sun on my shoulders. I want to watch the hawks hunt from the sycamore. And then take my leave, bound for a place near my old friend Chuck Larson in the Naval Academy Cemetery on the Severn, back where it began. The world is a fine place and worth the fighting for, and I hate very much to leave it," spoke my hero Robert Jordan in For Whom the Bell Tolls. And I do too. I hate to leave it. I've known great passions, seen amazing wonders, fought in a war, and helped make a peace. I've lived very well, and I've been deprived of all comforts. I've been as lonely as a person can be, and I've enjoyed the company of heroes. I've suffered the deepest despair and experienced the highest exultation. I made a small place for myself in the story of America and the history of my times. What an ingrate I would be to curse the fate that concludes the blessed life I've led. I prefer to give thanks for those blessings and my love to the people who have blessed me with theirs. The bell tolls for me. I knew it would. I hope those who mourn my passing, and even those who don't, will celebrate as I celebrate a happy life lived in imperfect service to a country made of ideals, whose continued success is the hope of the world. And I wish all of you great adventures, good company, and lives as lucky as mine." We recall this week during the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning, the names of Linda Buja, sister of Jim Buja, Emmanuel Block, father of Abby Block. And we recall during the period of Shana, the first year of mourning, the names of Loretta Sims, mother of Tony Sims, James Penuel, father of Lynn Rubenstein, Robert Campbell, father of Mike Campbell. And we recall this week the yahrzeits, the anniversaries of Albert Ani, father of Alan Ani, Charles Bierman, father of Andrew Bierman, Frances Bluestein, mother of Barbara Carmelin, Teresa Giordano, mother of Philip Giordano, Alice Haggerty, mother of Eileen Haggerty, Glenna Hodos, grandmother of Margot Rivelis, Harold Miller, father of Ellen Keith and Sharon Miller, Fred Romsey, father of Heidi Winokur. Are there others? The memories of all of them are with us. Our griefs and our sympathies are mingled as we now rise as a community to praise God and pray for the coming of God's rule. You can find the Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei tehol Beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kari v'emeru Amen. Yehe shemei Rabbah mevarach ve'elam olmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabah v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudusha b'rechu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran v'alma v'imru Amen. Yehe shalama rabba min shamaya V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And together let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
My name is Rosie Buja, and on behalf of the board, I would like to welcome you all to tonight's services. I'd also like to thank you, Rabbi, for leading us in prayer, and you, Lee, for volunteering to lead us once again in song. Next week is relatively quiet, culminating in an Erev Shabbat service on Friday, September 7th, 7:30, same time, same place. After that, as you all know, the calendar gets filled with High Holy Day events. We'll begin on Sunday, September 9th, with a Rev Rosh Hashanah at 7:30 at Franklin Federated Church. That will be followed by a Rosh Hashanah children's service at 9 a.m. at the same place on Monday, September 10th, and the regular Rosh Hashanah service at 10 a.m. It should come as no surprise that the second day of Rosh Hashanah will be celebrated on Tuesday, September 11th, at 10 in this building. We interrupt the High Holy Day schedule with a religious school open house on Wednesday, September 12th from 7 to 9 p.m. at our new school building at 201 Main Street, Franklin. I imagine that even if you don't have kids in school, you should go and check it out. Yom Kippur services begin Tuesday, September 18th at 7:30 with the Kol Nidre service and conclude the following day with Yom Kippur breakfast at 6:30 p.m. Break fast. I put a space between the two words. All of these events take place at the Framingham, at Franklin Federated Church. The Yom Kippur break fast will be made more delicious if you volunteer an item by going to Sign Up Genius. Please note this is a dairy meal. A brief note on the events in the Sukkah on Sunday, September 23rd. From 10:30 to 11:30, religious school students will read, it's called the Etrog by Jane Kohuth. I'll mumble. Weather permitting, reading will take place in the Sukkah. Please RSVP to Hannah Berman. And at 6 p.m. on that day, we will hold our annual Pizza in the Hut. Please RSVP by September 20th to Emily Berman or any religious activity member. For a detailed schedule of the High Holy Days and any other information, please check our website. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And if you don't want to check the website, you can check the really large board that we have in the social hall, in the community room. All right, so this is, as I mentioned, Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, and we conclude each service in Elul with the reading of the 27th Psalm. And since I mentioned the Mechitza, why don't we break it up that way? The women will read the odd-numbered verses, and the men will read the even-numbered verses. Somebody who's a woman can start.
Adonai is my light and my help. Whom should I fear? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom should I dread?
When evil ones assail me to devour my flesh, it is they, my foes and my enemies, who stumble and fall.
Should an army besiege me, my heart would have no fear. Should war beset me, still would I be confident.
One thing I ask of Adonai, only that do I seek, to live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of Adonai, to frequent God's temple.
Adonai will shelter me in God's pavilion on an evil day. Grant me the protection of God's tent. Raise me high upon a rock.
Now is my head high over my enemies round about. I sacrifice in God's tent with shouts of joy, singing and chanting a hymn to Adonai.
Hear, Adonai, when I cry aloud. Have mercy on me. Answer me.
In your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. Adonai, I seek your face.
Do not hide your face from me. Do not thrust aside your servant in anger. You have ever been my help. Do not forsake me. Do not abandon me. O God, my deliverer.
Though my father and mother abandon me, Adonai will take me in.
Show me your way, Adonai, and lead me on a level path because of my watchful foes.
Do not subject me to the will of my foes, for false witnesses and unjust accusers have appeared against me.
Had I not the assurance that I would enjoy the goodness of Adonai in the land of the living.
Together, look to Adonai, be strong and of good courage. Oh, look to Adonai. And part of that is rendered into a song. You can find it on page 358. And the song is Achat Sha'alti, from the 4th verse. One thing I ask of Adonai, only that do I seek, to live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of Adonai, and to frequent God's temple. Achat Sha'alti. Please rise and let's form a circle.
Thank you.